All right. Well, excited to be here for the next in our SRBA webinar series. This one is centered on restaurant excellence, and I'm joined here with George Haikal from Marquette University Blue and Gold Ventures, and Rosa Maria, oh, I forgot your last name. Remind me.
Noriega.
Okay, Rosa Maria Noriega. Is that all right? Close enough. We're gonna go with who have been spending. Rosa Maria has spent quite a bit of time in preparing thoughts on this, and I know her experience at Loyola Chicago has dealt nicely into her being able to speak with some expertise on what it takes to keep a restaurant running optimally and how to make really hard decisions about changing a model. So I'll let her tell you more about that, of course. And George Haikal here has been involved with opening a coffee house in Milwaukee, along with several new locations. And he's also learned particularly what it takes to help optimize operations for new restaurant businesses. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Rosa Maria and George. You guys can take us through the presentation, and I know that at the end we'll do a question and answer section. I might also ask clarifying questions throughout. And if you guys are happy to take any questions as you go too, I think we can be pretty casual here with the five of us. One thing I will mention is that we promised to do a good follow-up here to store some nice materials that could be complementary to the presentation. I'll distribute that via email, and we'll have it posted under member resources for people to see later on as they watch the video. Okay, great. Thank you, Rosa Maria. Hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to do a little brief introduction on myself, and then George can introduce himself just so people can have some background as to what we do. I was part of the Loyola Limited program at Loyola University Chicago for about 2 years. And in this time, I ran Felice's Kitchen, which was a pizza shop that was very close to the university. And I ran that for a year, and then we made the decision to close it down based on some things that I'll talk about in this presentation. And then I also pitched to get some funding for a new restaurant. We decided to try out a new concept. So we got the money to do a new restaurant, which will be called Roots. We were in the process of opening it, but we got hit by the pandemic. So eventually I'm sure that the students at Loyola Limited will do a great job in doing it, whatever is in store for the restaurant, we'll see. But during my time at Felice's Kitchen, I was able to run a staff of around 36 people. And it was super interesting because we had obviously we had dine-in, but we also had catering service, and we had delivery. So it was a lot of different operations going on at once, which made it pretty complex and very fun. So I'll be sharing what I can with you today about that.
Thank you. Hey everybody, I'm George. I'm a current junior. I'm still working for Blue and Gold at Marquette. What I did when I first joined is I operated and basically optimized a coffee shop in Milwaukee, like Owen said. And we were handed this coffee shop. The grand opening happened, and we were handed it, and we were losing money every month. And what myself and my partner Jane tried to do was optimize every little thing that we could, from the marketing, the operations, to the bakery orders, to the training, the hiring, and all the little procedures in between. Optimize those in a way that we were maximizing efficiency and losing the least amount of money possible. And after a month or two of doing that really, really well, in my opinion, we tried. It was a lot of work. We went from losing money to break even to slowly starting to profit. And then COVID, of course, hit, and we had to close down. But we have hopes of reactivating the space with high schools and other groups in the future. So.
Nice. All right, so this is a brief agenda just to see what we're going to be covering today. We really are focusing this presentation for people who are interested, for other students who are interested in opening up a business. So we want to make sure that we make it as attainable for them as possible, and we give as much practical advice as we can. So the first, we're going to be talking about just some very quick facts about the restaurant industry so they know what they're getting into. And then we're going to be talking about just first steps. So I'll be talking about the market, the model, and the people just kind of some of the elements that I thought were the most crucial when I was planning for the opening of the newer restaurant Roots. And then we will be talking about the operations, giving some examples of our experiences, both in front and back of house, what we learned, what we think would be good things to implement in a new restaurant. And then we'll leave it open for questions, see if we can answer any of those. Alrighty. So first of all, we wanted to, so like if you're thinking about opening up a restaurant, these are some things that are crucial for you to know. First of all, is that it's super fast paced. So that means it's very exciting. It means that you will never be bored. There's always going to be something new for you to do, something new for you to learn. Another thing is that it's very low margin. So you want to make sure that you're not thinking of this as like a way to make a ton of money, at least in the beginning. You know, like if you want to go for like very high margins, this is not necessarily the right business, but you are going to be getting a lot of experience in many different areas that are very important. And then it's definitely high risk, and it's very customer oriented. So this is just kind of to kind of flesh it out, you know, like if you're interested in this type of business or not. We just wanted to put that out there. And George and I both agree that this is something that people need to be aware of. You know, it comes with its pros and its cons. All right, so I'm going to be talking about these three elements first. I'm going to be talking about the market, the model, and the people. So let's start off with the market. Okay, so if you're thinking of opening up a new restaurant, I definitely think that you need to start here. You need to understand where you are, who you're going to be catering to, and what they want. Like this is crucial. This is pretty basic for any type of business. But here, what I kind of tailored it a little bit more is just knowing where you are. Is it very high traffic? Are you going to be targeting people that are walking by? Are there offices nearby? All of these things, because then that changes the types of services you might want to offer. George here actually has a really cool experience in terms of like location that I'll ask for him to share in a bit, because we were in a pretty busy street, but it was a lot of cars, you know, so we had some foot traffic. So we had to kind of cater our approach in that regard. We had some office buildings, we had the school nearby. So, and we also had our neighborhood, which consisted of a very different demographic than our university. And so that's also very important to kind of note and see when in the moment where you're developing your menu, you're setting your prices and all of that. You don't want to go in and stick out like a sore thumb. Like you really want to make sure that you are kind of blending in a way, not blending in, that's the wrong word. It would be more like really making sure that you make sense in the place where you are. So George, if you want to share your location story, I think that was really cool.
Sure. So basically our coffee shop was on the first level of an office building, not a giant one, a normal sized office building. And it was off of a main street with no real street access. So it was kind of hard to get foot traffic or customers that way. Across the street was construction. So there was always something going on outside, distracting from the coffee shop. We had a sign, but we realized that our target market was really our office building and getting everyone in there to know us and love us. And so what we did was everything from always having a promotional poster or flyer posted to attract the people in the office building to on their lunch breaks, we would walk up and down the floors with samples, with coffee, with paninis, with all these little bakery treats, talk to the people, get to know them, first name basis. They would talk to us about their children. They would leave us letters and notes. And so by realizing the market that was around us, instead of trying to compete with like a Starbucks where they have high volume, high traffic, we really understood our market, and that helped us to make money in maybe a not so optimal place for a coffee shop.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I think what George and I were talking about is that it's really important to know where you are and then just be creative. I mean, half of having a student-run business is really just using what you have, and nothing is going to be like a perfect answer. But, you know, if you can really get into the dirt and like see what's going on around you, then you can definitely come up with some really cool and creative ideas and strategies to make whatever you have work. And then the last point that I have on here is developing the menu. Like if you're in the starting points of, you know, starting your business, obviously the menu is going to be crucial. So I would really encourage you to go out, talk to the people that are in your community, make sure you know what they want, make sure that you do more higher level analysis in terms of like what's around you, look at a 1 mile radius, look at a 5 mile radius, you know, who's in your area of competition, what are they offering? How can you do it better? What can you offer that they're not offering? And yeah, then just make sure that you price it accordingly and that you make an analysis that you can see if your margins are actually something that you can work with, because this is going to be crucial. If you have a menu that, you're making money off of, then you're good. If you have items that are way too expensive or ingredients that are too expensive, then, that's going to be a problem for you later down the road. So make sure that you play with that line, make sure that you know what type of quality you want to offer and how you can offer that quality for the best price. And that you're going to get into the whole dealing with vendor situation. But yeah, very high level, these are some points that I would definitely recommend you take a look at. All right, and then we're going to go into a little more of the finances behind the business. And these are some things that I found out or that really clicked for me towards like the middle and the end of my time at Felice's. And it's just like seeing all the different patterns, you really need to understand your business model. And from what George and I were talking about, and from what we've seen in the restaurant industry, we've really been able to nail these three like key financial metrics that you need to understand. There's a high person in our organization, Loyola Limited, and he always says like to keep your fingers on the pulse of the business, and that to me is super important. Like you really need to know like how your business is doing, and for that you need to know like the key things. You don't need to know like all the little details. You need to make sure that if someone asks you like, well, how's your business doing, you can point to these three things, and that will tell you like how your general business is doing. So for instance, in the restaurant business, the rent, the labor, and the cost of goods sold are going to be crucial. So like rent, if you don't own your building, that's usually going to be a pretty high expense that you're dealing with. Your labor is always, a situation, minimum wage is always going up. You need to make sure that your people are paid. That's not something that's negotiable. You need to make sure you pay your people. And then the cost of goods sold are going to be your ingredients. So that goes back a little bit to what I was talking about with, making sure that you pick your ingredients carefully, make sure that you don't have a massive list of ingredients because that's going to make things more complicated for you, and making sure that you deal with waste, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a bit. And then something that I wanted to bring that's a bit unique to our situation is that we did close down a restaurant. We closed down Felice's. And something that I think we could have done differently from the very beginning was kind of setting benchmarks in terms of, okay, and this is something that we did with the new restaurant. We have to really think about what happens if the business doesn't perform like we think it will. So this is useful for any sort of business. You need to make sure that you have kind of like your forecast. You need to make sure what you think you're going to be making, and then if you don't hit those financial metrics, be prepared to make some hard decisions, because after all, we are student run, but we want to make sure that we have healthy finances. So that's something that I would recommend specifically for this sort of business as well, because it is so volatile and because it is very high risk, as we said in the beginning. So just make sure that you know what you're willing to spend, and then if you don't hit your numbers, then don't be scared to just think of something new, because that's also part of it. And then the three here, I put some of our friends from Loyola Limited. They're from the Flats, our hotel. Okay, 3 is the people. And this is super obvious, but I feel like it's always good to remind ourselves, people are really the ones that you're going to be working with every single day. So you really need to make sure that when you're opening your restaurant, you have in your mind like what you want your people, how you want them to be, how you want your culture to be, and really make sure that you're embodying all the values that you say you want people to reflect. This is something that I found was of the most crucial importance, and one of the tips that I can leave here is really just be the person that you want everyone else to be. So like, you can't fake this part. Like, what I mean about being the right leader is really just embodying everything that you want to see in your corporation. So it can't be just like you're telling people what you do and you're not doing it yourself. You definitely need to be leading by example. You need to be someone that's open to receiving feedback. You need to be someone that's ready to accept when you're doing things wrong and to change, because that's part of what being a leader is. You need to listen, you need to have your vision, but if it's not working, you need to know how to pivot, and just make sure that you're always being kind to the people you're working with. And that's something that is definitely going to help you, because then these people are the ones that are going to help you, make sure that the vision that you have in your mind truly comes to life. All right, and now we're going to go into the fun part, or like one of the more fun parts, which I think is the whole operations element. And George has some really cool contributions to make here. We decided to break it down into front of house and back of house. Both of these are absolutely crucial that you have working together in harmony, because if you have one that's, you know, performing and the other one that's not, it's not going to be a successful restaurant. Like, you really need to make sure that both of these are in perfect harmony. So we decided that it would be really useful for someone opening up a restaurant to know kind of what goes on behind the scenes. All right, George.
Sure. So just starting with customer service, this is the face of your company. So how you treat people, like Rosa Maria was saying, people are the most important thing. That's inside your company, and that's the customers who are coming into your restaurant as well. So you are the face. You have to treat people with respect, and you have to leave a positive impression on them. When they leave your restaurant, you want them to remember you. You want them to spread the word. That's how you get those recurring customers, and that's how you get all those reviews that everyone looks for when they're viewing you online. They want to see, oh, have people been here? What do people have to say about that? That's a super important part of it. And I think that communication, and one thing that student-run businesses all have in common is we all have a really, really good story to tell that none of our competitors have. And if you can train your people and be able to tell that story and communicate it in an organic and positive way to all your customers, I think that's an advantage that, if utilized correctly, is really, really, really beneficial.
Definitely. And then for the restaurant layout, I decided that this was also a very important part for two reasons. Continuing into the whole aspect of really making sure that your space is really welcoming and that your customers feel you know, happy to be there. But then it's also important in terms of finances. You know, if you have your space and you're able to understand it and really utilize your space as intelligently as possible, then that means you can fit more people in there. That means you can, you know, make more money off of each table. And so this is something that we really looked at with the new restaurant. You know, some basic things to keep in mind is just like how many tables, you know, how you want your people to move through the restaurant, you know, so the flow of the line, you know, if you have multiple doors, how exactly do you want your customers to use that? And that's all really important things to think about beforehand, so that once you're actually operating, it just flows naturally, and you don't find that all of a sudden you have like a blocked you know, door because customers are utilizing that as, you know, where they're forming a line. So all of that's important to think about.
Definitely. And I think the last piece, design and advertising, really brings all three of these together, because, okay, you have your customer service, everyone's trained well, everyone's treated well, people love you, and you have a good reputation already. Your restaurant layout is optimized and it's welcoming. It's a really good environment to be in. You're gaining customers that way. I think the final piece is this design and advertising, where I touched on it a little earlier, but you leverage your marketing and your promotions and your posters and all your sales and deals. You always have a new thing for your customers to get excited about. For me and us, it was a new drink every week, a new panini and soup special, a combination of the two. Any little thing that switches up the day-to-day routine and people get excited about will draw in new customers. And I think that something that goes along with that too is good-looking merch and little items in your store that catch their eye. It's a talking point. I really just think design and advertising is a big part of the front of the house.
Definitely. All right. Go ahead.
I can start this. So back of the house operations, obviously you want a symbiotic relationship between the two, the front and the back. And this is the more operational aspect of it. And I'll just start with food safety. So it's pretty straightforward, but it's extremely, extremely important. Serve Safe certifications, health code, all these need to be very, very strictly followed, because you never want to run into a problem where you have a customer complaint, someone gets sick because of your food, one of your employees complains because someone else wasn't handling some food or some frozen food correctly. So although these are straightforward, it's really, really important for everyone in the company to be on the same page about these and always be super safe.
Definitely. And something else to keep in mind is that it really depends on what type of restaurant you want to have. If you're going to have a bar where you already have prepared food and you don't really have to worry about that much, then that definitely takes down or de-escalates the difficulty of everything. But if you want to have a place where you're cooking food, you know, if you have raw meat, you're handling things like that, then you really want to make sure that you pay close attention to this, because the requirements for your restaurant will also change. So that's something that you need to make sure when you're looking at licensing. You'll have to have a license for your restaurant. That's part of the legal that we don't really touch on that much here, but it's also something that should be in your radar. You know, the way they classify you is going to change, and the way they look at you once they come in for an actual health inspection will change. So that's something to be very conscious about. You know, just making sure that you know how to handle raw meat, you know, all the different temperatures that go alongside with that, are things that you need to make sure that you know as the owner, and also that you transmit properly to all of your employees.
Yep. So I think for processes, I had a pretty funny and interesting experience with that. I basically joined the restaurant when none of these were laid out before me. So I would open and close the shop, but realize, how is someone who isn't me going to know how to do that? So for literally every little thing I can think of, opening and closing the shop, the cash drawer procedures, washing the dishes, everything needed an SOP, a standard operating procedure. And it made it so much easier to train people, and you wouldn't receive, like, it's great to be in communication with your employees, but to have all the processes listed out either on a drive virtually or in the shop posted, which is what we had, it's really nice to have that, because all your employees can constantly reference it. And instead of a simple question that is laid out in these, they would have to reach out to you personally. And I mean, that's great, but everyone has class and everyone has a lot of things on their plate. So it's good to have one place where everyone knows all the answers are there. Everything's laid out and there's really no questions.
Definitely not much to add here, just to echo what you're saying. You know, if you do it now, if you do it at the very beginning, and if you can, you know, actually research, you know, what are the most common scenarios that happen at restaurants, you know, which are a lot, but I mean, if you can get some of those down on paper and train your people on them beforehand, you're going to be saving yourself a lot of time and a lot of headaches down the road. So that's definitely a good place to invest your time.
Definitely. And moving on to inventory. So another example for us, we were trying to reduce costs, like I mentioned before, and we kind of did all that we could with training and hiring. We cut down opening and closing times, cut down a few staff, just limited hours and our operation hours. And the last thing we were left with was food waste and inventory. We would get weekly, bi-weekly deliveries of bakery and food items, and we realized that we were wasting food every week. And it was good, okay, our employees got to go home with like an extra snack, but for the business, it wasn't good. So what we did was every single day we recorded how much of each item was sold. And we'd realize throughout the week, okay, Mondays, people like more soup and these 3 bakery items. Tuesdays, it was always different. Wednesdays, Thursdays, etc. So what we did after 2 or 3 weeks, we averaged it all out and found par values for every single item in our inventory. And by ordering based on those par values, we, within like 1 or 2 items each time, we were very, very zeroed in, and we were able to cut down costs per week by 200 to 400. And that each week really, really cut down our bottom line and helped us to reach our break even.
Yeah, that's really cool. We did something similar. We had a pretty extensive ingredient list. So at the beginning, what we did is that we also tried to, you know, shave out all those things that weren't completely necessary. And then just on a more technical note, we had everything listed on an Excel sheet, and then we used if values. If you're familiar with those, if you're not, I would recommend looking into them, because it just kind of allows you to, you know, set values. For example, you know, if you always want to have pizza boxes at, you know, you always want to have 2 extra cartons or like large bags of pizza boxes, then, you know, you could set that as your minimum. And then for the person that's doing, you know, handling all the ordering, that also helps them if they see, you know, if the manager went around and saw that there's only 1 pizza box and put that down in the Excel, then the formula would help them see that it's necessary to order it again. So again, this is just kind of like a little tip to optimize in terms of, you know, how much you're spending on how much time. And then just to second what George is saying, definitely just make sure that you're really in the store and you're understanding how like the sales are fluctuating, which days you're selling more, which days you're selling less. Make sure that you really have your boots on the ground so that you can see what's going on around you. And really that's where you're going to be able to cut down all those excess or all those extra expenses that you don't really need. And you can really see those percentages go down because, for instance, if you're spending 30% on your inventory and you're able to get down to like 28%, you're just going to see a massive, massive increase in like your bottom line and just just in general, your finances are going to be much better. So pay attention to inventory for sure.
Definitely. And finally, technology. I would just say broadly for this, work smarter, not harder, and use technology to your advantage. Just starting with communication, I think, like I mentioned before, like we both did actually, just being able to communicate with your team constantly and everyone being on the same page, whether it's about work, we're all in college, so whether it's personal things, just being the person who anyone can rely on and come to for questions, for advice, for business advice, for personal, being that person really helps bring up the company culture and really makes you reliable and respected in your company, which is always a good thing. And for the more software aspects of it, I think it's great to get a handle on scheduling and those systems. We used Homebase, which was a pretty straightforward shift manager. Everyone loved it, and you can communicate through the app. You can ask for covers really easily, and it worked out really, really well. That was scheduling. And for our POS system, that was pretty straightforward too. It was easy for our employees to be trained on, and they could add items and they could edit. So I think just putting tech all together, just getting a handle on of it and maximizing each part of it to the best of your ability is one of the best things that we could have done.
Yeah. And then if you're at the beginning stages as well, it's going to be really cool for you to really make a list of the things that you want out of your technology and then see what can I remember Peyton telling me this all the time, like always make sure that you really know what you want and then try to find that in technology, like make it work for you. For instance, we were really into trying to get a platform that allowed us to deliver, and that made it very easy, like streamlined it within the POS system so that any of the orders that we got from delivery got sent directly to the POS system and then printed out in the back so that we wouldn't be working with a lot of different platforms. So that's something that you might be interested in looking into. Always just do your research, make sure that if you want to go into delivery, it's actually beneficial for you. If you want to go, partner up with any delivery platform, make sure that they don't have any like hidden fees that could, potentially bite into your bottom line, things like that. And yeah, just make sure that you really do your research and find the ones that work the best for you, because it's going to be also a great investment in the long run. All right. And that's all we had for our presentation. So the next one really is just like, if you have any questions that you want to make, we're more than happy to take them now.
So I'd like to just jumpstart this with one question for each of you based on our earlier discussions, and then open it up to everybody else. The first question I had for Rosa Maria was, you had to make a really difficult decision to change or reconceptualize the restaurant Felice's into Roots. And I think that's a really interesting and bold move to make. I've seen it happening more frequently since COVID struck, just among restaurants that I know of, where they've stepped back and they said, hey, we had to close anyway. Maybe it's time that we update like our business model and what our restaurant does to better match like who our customers are, and to better like energize that customer base. But really prior to COVID, it seems so rare that somebody takes a restaurant that they own and just puts in all the work to like completely redo it. So can you explain in as much detail as you're willing what factors showed you or metrics that the restaurant would be better off reconceptualized, or that you couldn't just get it to increase profits with the old model? How did you make that decision?
For sure. So I think it was two main elements that really brought us to make this decision. One of it was just the history that it had been open already for 7 years, and it had already gone through like a lot of internal changes. We've already tried to optimize all of our processes to the best of our abilities. And then it reaches a certain point where it goes back to the benchmarks that we were talking about. You really have to make sure that how much you're willing to invest in a certain idea before you say, this isn't working. Why isn't it working? And so that's really the question that we started posing. It's like, why isn't it working? And we came into some internal factors, yes, but also a lot of external factors that were a lot more sizable that we had previously considered. So for instance, the strip, like where we're located, the street on where we're located, at the very beginning, it only had one pizza shop, and that was Felice's. And so if you look at the numbers, that's when it was like the most profitable, you know, because we were one of the only restaurants there, you know, we were offering a service that no one else was offering. But then in 7 years, like that whole area went through like massive changes. So all of a sudden we had Blaze Pizza, you know, we had Potbellies, we had a bunch of different restaurants that were chains. You know, they have a business model that's very different from a small business. They can provide lower costs, you know, because, you know, their business model is just completely different than ours. So it was just a point where we were like, in the whole, you know, we can't really compete with them on pizza. If we're going to be doing that, we need to offer something else. And so that was when we really decided, is there room for a restaurant? Is there room for a restaurant? That was like the first question. And the answer was yes. But the second answer was, is it this restaurant? And the answer was no. So we decided that we wanted to try something different, something that really brought us closer to our customers. We did a whole analysis of, you know, what are people really looking for? What need isn't being met, and how can we fulfill that? So that's really how we moved forward from that. And it was a very tough decision at the beginning, because, you know, when you're dealing with closing a restaurant, there's a lot of factors that are involved. You know, obviously we were very close to it because it had been operating for 7 years. It was a business that we were all really attached to. So there's that element too. But you have to go beyond that and really look at the opportunities. So that's when we decided to, you know, go in that direction and really take it as an opportunity to reinvent ourselves and to be able to provide a better service for you know, for our community. That was really what drove it.
That's really cool. I appreciate how you were able to go back to the 7 years worth of data and kind of cross-check that against the external changes to see what was causing a limit on the growth for the business.
Definitely.
So that's really cool. Yeah. Okay, I have a few more questions, but I'll set them aside and just open it up to other people and see what else you all want to know.
Rosa, I have a question for you. I was just looking at your LinkedIn profile because I couldn't figure out, or maybe I missed, are you a student or are you a full-time staff person?
I'm an alum, so I was part of the program. I just graduated this May.
Okay, so are you still involved in the running of Roots with the organization?
No. I handed off over the baton.
Okay.
Yeah.
And to kind of go off of your question then, Kim, and kind of where this is going, Rosa, when you did that, and I know, George, you mentioned about, you know, kind of keeping SOPs and everything in one place. How did you guys think about, you know, succession planning and transition? Because this, right, you've set things up for great success, but then you want to make sure that the next group can kind of continue on with that. Mm-hmm. So kind of what are your thoughts around that, and what's worked?
Well, that was a big part of my whole job for the last couple of months, because I knew for a fact that I was leaving. You know, I was a senior and we were right in the middle of launching a new business. So it was really important for us to have all the processes. And for me, what it was that first of all, it started by building a team or identifying a person that I knew I could train for a longer period of time, and then they could continue, because sometimes, you know, when you are able to spend time with the person, they can at least transmit it a little bit longer. So what I did is that I found my successor before, like a couple of months before I actually had to you know, leave. And what I did is that I worked with him very closely. You know, I really wanted him to see kind of what was my vision behind everything and the way I did things. So then when I gave him all the written documents, they made sense to him in a more profound way. And then just in terms of all the SOPs and all of that, I think maybe George can speak a little bit more to this, but what we did is that we really just wrote them all down and we had them all in one platform. So we found this really cool platform that's called Connect Team that acts as a scheduling tool. It acts as a communication tool, like you can talk to all of your employees, and also serves as a drive. So we put all of our documents in there. You know, if we have any process, like any checklists, anything that needs to be stored like on the cloud, we had it all there, so that I wanted to minimize the number of things I had to pass on. So in my case, it was kind of like the presidential transition documents where I put down a lot of like the vision, like the more high level stuff, and then just the more practical things like in one platform, which was useful for me. I don't know how George did that.
Yeah, so that was a great question because it's making me starting to think. I'm a junior and I'm getting more senior in the program, so I have to look at, okay, bringing someone on and what's the best way to help them learn and get ready for a position like this. And what I can reference is when I first joined, Kat Jokic was the president before me. And the first thing she did was, it wasn't a business meeting. We just sat there and talked. And I think that's really important too, because to see her as a friend and this woman, this student who was running a company was really, really cool. And it made me feel like I can open up to her about the business and not just be like a boss employee relationship, because we're all students. So I think whoever I decide to like help bring on, I think meeting them face to face on that level is really, really important. And that's all separate from the SOPs. Like Rosa Maria was saying, it's great to have a centralized location for all those documents, because after you teach them by showing them, by them shadowing you, it's really important for them to be able to reference any little document. And for us, we use Google Drive, which is where we have a ton of folders. Everything's organized, where if you have a question about operations, you go here. Okay, which shop you're looking for, that folder. It's really, really straightforward. But now I'm going to leave this webinar, and now I have to think about, okay, do I start setting up a plan for bringing someone on? What can I do in the best way? So thank you, because I'm going to be doing a lot of research now for that.
Well, thank you both.
Mm.
Can I ask a question, Rosa Maria, about your POS system? So correct me if I'm wrong, but Loyola is owned by the university.
Correct.
So therefore, did you have to use the POS system that the university has? It sounded to me like you were able to use a different one.
Yes, well, that's a very good topic that you're bringing up, because we definitely had to work within the constraints of what the university allowed us. Teams prior to me were able to move away a little bit from the POS that the university used, and so we had one that was called ShopKeep. And that one really, I mean, if we want to get technical, the constraint was that we couldn't process credit cards through the POS system. It had to be through the university's credit card processor. So that was really the constraint. And then for Roots, we tried implementing another one, which was Toast. I mean, that was a whole story. We never really got that passed, but it was our hope. So it was definitely working within those constraints.
And then do you allow, because the whole delivery opportunity is something that we're looking at launch, because our current POS system doesn't allow for that type of flexibility. But
Okay.
Some of the challenges that we're looking at is that we would like a POS system to be able to both accept credit cards payment as well as our Muskie card payment. That's a bit of a challenge. So we've kind of shelved this for the moment, but that is helpful to know that you did look at a different system, because
Yes.
we weren't sure we were going to be able to do that. We were looking at perhaps just creating an app to do delivery service, which is not going to integrate with our POS system.
Okay. Are you allowed to use a different POS system, or do you also have the constraints of the university?
We are still working on that topic. We have a little different dynamic, which allowed us to kind of shelve this right now, because we actually are not running any of our dining services or coffee shop services at the present time. We've only been operational for a few months. So we are still looking at what options the university may be open to.
Okay. I would recommend Toast if you can get it. It's a wonderful thing. I fought for it for a long time.
Did you, Rosa Maria, did you guys experiment with delivery?
With, what do you mean?
With delivery of product that people would order from Felice's. Did Felice's deliver to dorms or to nearby residences?
Yes, we actually had a golf cart. It was really cool. We had a little red golf cart that went around delivering pizzas.
Oh, could you tell us more about how, because delivery is a very common question and point of interest, especially near campuses
Oh,
and especially during COVID. So could you tell us more about how you handled it both from a first technical perspective? So how did people place those orders? Secondly, from an operational perspective, so like who was actually going out and doing the deliveries and how did you pay them?
definitely. So the way that we did it was we had two different types of deliveries. One was internal, which is the one that we use the golf cart for, and then we also partnered with Grubhub, so they would deliver, out into the neighborhood because as I mentioned, we're placed in a pretty residential neighborhood where, there's other types of customers that we wanted to reach. So we use Grubhub for them, and then for the university itself, anything on campus, we use the golf cart. People would call, when it was through Grubhub, it was pretty simple. The website handled itself. It was on Grubhub's platform, and then they paid us later. But for internal, we used phone. So it was just a phone call. They would call us. We would take down their information. We tried to only accept their card because that just made it easier for the driver, so they didn't have to accept any cash when they were driving. So they would just call us. We would type in their information or charge them through the phone, and then the whole delivery aspect, it would depend. Sometimes we had 3 employees on shift, sometimes we had 2. So then that would alternate, it would just be like the person that wasn't doing anything at that particular moment, or, the person that was the least busy would leave. And then they would take the golf cart, deliver the pizzas, and then come back. But that was definitely a challenge. And I would encourage, if someone's interested in that, just make sure that you think about the elements, because if you're ever really busy and then you also have to have a person there that is delivering, and that could also hurt the experience in store. So that's a very fine line that needs to be walked. And I would recommend that it just depends on your volume. So if you know that in certain times of the day, you're going to have more people coming in, then you staff an extra person just so that you have that mobility and you can go out and deliver.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Does anybody else have any follow-up questions on the delivery topic? It is a pretty common point of inquiry.
No, but I will second, Rosa, kind of what you said, because we have starships here, which are robots that do delivery for food around campus.
What?
And they didn't plan, right, for the person to bring it out and to take in all of those deliveries, and they were just in tears. And so they did need to think about, right, all of, staffing and thinking about fulfilling those orders too that would come in for those.
Yes.
And then, so you used Grubhub, and then you took orders by phone and handled them internally. Well, one question I did have was insurance at all an obstacle to you for doing like the golf cart delivery? Or was that an easy?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's see. I have a couple of other questions for these guys. Does anybody else have one they want to ask right away? Okay, and then we'll probably wrap up just a little bit early and work on making sure that some of the technologies and materials that we mentioned during today's discussion get into that follow-up material. The last questions I had for you guys are, first of all, what were some unexpected challenges that you ran into while you were running the business? Things that people didn't give you a heads up on, but turned out to be really, really difficult. And how did you get through those? Do any stand out to either of you?
Yeah, I can talk about this one for a bit. I just think inventory was one I didn't think was going to be such a big task. So what we had to do was we had to personally make weekly or however often we needed restaurant depot runs to get everything we needed for the shop. And aside from setting up all the par values and knowing what we needed, making those extra trips and getting everything constantly is a lot more work than I think I ever thought it would be. And it's really hard to, when you have a limited number of employees, it's really hard to ask them to do it when they're in the shop, and we have the mobility to pop into the shop, help out, and then do the inventory as well. So I think it was an unexpected obstacle, but I think after you get a handle on it, it gets a lot easier.
Yeah, so Restaurant Depot is like our centralized provider of restaurant material, like some of the to-go items, as well as we were buying some of the like soups from Restaurant Depot, and so forth, some frozen foods. And yeah, that makes sense, George. Like that was quite a logistical challenge, making sure the deliveries got there. And I don't think we were able to develop a solution that everybody liked actually before COVID hit.
That was hard.
Rosa Maria, what about for you? Any major challenges that you had run into unexpectedly?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think for me, all of it was just a giant challenge, but two of the things that I found that were really like that just hit me out of complete left field was, or that I was really, I had a lot of respect for it moving forward. It was just like the art of scheduling, because I just feel like that it's just like its own monster, you know? So like really being able to schedule properly means that you know your operation very, very well. And I think that just takes time. So yeah, at the beginning it was just like, oh yeah, well, I mean, we can staff two people there, like it'll be fine. It's like, no, that's not how it works, you know? Like you really need to look at a lot of the data. You need to make sure that you understand how, you know, the sales flow and all of that. So that was something that I had a really good time figuring out. And then the second part was just the importance of not knowing, like of knowing your equipment. Because I think one of the things that I felt like the most impotent when was when like someone called me and they were like, the fridge broke. It's like, oh no, it's like, what do you do when the fridge breaks, you know, and you're like in the middle of class. So just something that was super useful was just like having a sheet of like everyone that can possibly fix something, like everything that can break, you need to have a list and like who to call to fix it. Because if not, they're going to call you and they're going to be like, oh, you know, like, I don't know, what else broke? Like the oven broke, you know? And then you're like, well, you know, that's it for the day. So you have to.
Yeah, it could be the fridge, the oven, the sink, the air conditioner. Any of these could really throw a wrench in your daily operations.
Yes, all of the above. So definitely having a list for that is important.
Yeah, great point. Okay, and then were there any unexpected skills that you developed? So as a result of doing it, so let's say that some of the folks on the call today may be considering getting into food service as a student-run business program, and may want to know, like, what does this really offer you as a student? What do you learn that's different from doing a food service business versus a different one? And you guys may not have had experience doing both. Or maybe you did, but what are some skills that you think you learned that were unique to being involved in food service, that are like transferable, or may not just be, I learned more about pizza, you know?
Well, I think that it's one of the more holistic businesses that you can really get into, because you're looking into a little bit of everything. You have to be, at least in our business, you had to be in charge. Like when you were on shift, you were in charge of front of house and back of house. So that just gives you like a lot of different skills. Like you have to be technically proficient. Obviously, you have to be able to, you know, cut the food properly. You have to be able to, I mean, we did all of our food from scratch, you know, so like making the dough, you know, cooking the chicken, all of that is very technical. You know, you're learning how to actually cook. And then you also need to know how to interact with the customers, which is just something that you can use anywhere. You know, if you have good customer service skills, that's transferable to any business. And going even higher than that, I think it teaches you how to be really good on your feet, how to be a good problem solver, how to, just really know how to innovate and to not let the world come crashing down when an issue happens, because there's always something that's going to go wrong. And I think that's something that's useful, like anywhere in life at any point.
Mm-hmm. Like the refrigerator breaking or whatever.
Exactly.
George, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything you just said. And at a higher level, I think the problem solving skills, that's not just one skill. The problem solving itself branches to everything that you do, whether it's, okay, a fridge broke, like we were just saying, how do I fix that? Or we're not getting enough customers, what do we need to do to fix that? And before I was in this program or starting to run this coffee shop, I had no, like, if we didn't have enough customers, I would just think we were doing poorly and I wouldn't know what to do to fix it. But after having to run this, you know that there's stuff you can do on the marketing side of things, the operation side of things. You can go talk to people. You can go promote yourself in the company. you can interview your team and ask, what are you doing right? What are we doing wrong? What more can we do? So there's always something you can improve, even if you're profiting and you have a great business. So I think the biggest thing I took away from this is just knowing that whatever situation you're in, you can always problem solve and improve your position.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, and my last question is, was there any part of running the restaurant that you think, because it was student run, made it particularly challenging? Or something people who maybe have restaurant experience but aren't used to doing it with students, something that they should know and think about?
Yeah. For us, our shop was in West Dallas, which is a car ride away from campus, which is really, really hard to schedule and manage when I think Jane, who was my partner, she was the only one who had a car. Actually, 2 employees had a car out of 8. And so we had to schedule in a way where the people with cars were always paired with 1 or 2 who didn't have a car. And that meant, and on top of that, around classes and tests and like people having soccer practice and rugby practice. So it was really, really hard scheduling wise. And I think that's due to the location, it not being directly on campus, and it being student run, because everyone has so much else going on. It's not as easy as, okay, I have a shift now, I can walk to my shift, I can get there, bang it out, go back. You need a ride, you need a bus pass. So there's a lot of things that go into it. And I think, yeah, that was a big thing we had.
Yeah, proximity of the location then is a big factor. And yeah, Jane was our scheduling artist. Rosa Maria pointed out how challenging that can be. But yeah, somebody had to be very serious about the scheduling, like a scheduling ninja. I don't know. Rosa Maria, anything stand out for you in terms of unique challenges to being student run?
Yeah, definitely scheduling, of course, like George said, and then also turnover. I mean, we're there for a maximum of 4 years. You know, most people don't stay the entire time. So I think that's just important to take into account. And then that also bleeds into making sure that you have a very solid training plan so that you're already accounting for that. Because, you know, the more complex your operation gets, the more training you have to do. And if people are, leaving at a higher rate, then that can definitely affect your quality.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, there are so many questions that we could dig into. I think we could go on forever. I have questions about like how you decide to do dough from scratch or buy it frozen, for example. But I know that has a lot to do with your market and some of the broader terms that you discussed here, and getting to know your customer and designing the business model to match the consumer needs. So I think you guys did an excellent job with the overview. Very much appreciated. And like I said, what we'll do is we'll create a follow-up, have some links or information related to any of the technology or concepts that we discussed during the webinar today. And folks are welcome, I think, to reach out to you guys, Rosa Maria and George, if they have any questions for you later on.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Cool. So we'll post your info on the site, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up for today. Yeah, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. Yeah, great attendance too.
Thank you.
Thanks for,
That's great.
Thank you.
all right, have a good one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.